The story of Byzantium is not merely a chapter in a textbook. It is the story of Rome's survival. While the western provinces of the Roman Empire crumbled under the weight of migration and internal decay, the East endured for over 1,000 years. It did not just survive, it thrived, preserving the light of classical civilization during a time when much of the world was slipping into shadow. To understand the longevity of Byzantium, we must look at the transition from the ancient Roman state to the medieval Greek Empire. This evolution wasn't overnight. It was a synthesis that proved incredibly resilient, a society that was uniquely Roman in its political structure, but Hellenistic in its soul. It begins in 324 AD. The Roman world is exhausted by decades of civil war. Out of the chaos emerges Constantine the Great, a man of singular vision. Victorious, and reunited under his banner, Constantine seeks a new capital, a new Rome that would be free from the pagan ghosts and political baggage of the old city. He chooses Byzantium, an ancient Greek colony strategically positioned on the Bosporus. In 330 AD, the city is dedicated as Constantinople. Constantine's death left a divided empire. His sons fought for control, but the cultural shift was already permanent. The center of gravity had moved east. This relocation was not just geographical, it was intellectual. While Latin remained the language of law and the military for centuries, Greek was the language of the people, the church, and eventually the court. Education remained a pillar of this society. While the West entered a period of relative illiteracy, Byzantine children studied the classics of Greek literature and philosophy. The university in Constantinople, founded in 425, stood as one of the first true institutions of higher learning in the world, teaching medicine, law, and philosophy to the future administrators of the state. By the late 4th century, the Roman world faced a crossroads. Emperor Theodosius I made Christianity the official state religion, cementing the bond between the cross and the crown. He also dealt with the rising Gothic threat, a harbinger of the storms to come. Upon his death in 395, the empire was formally split between his sons, Arcadius and Honorius. This division became the permanent border between East and West. It was a line drawn in the sand of history. On one side, a fading western sunset. On the other, a rising eastern dawn. Historical deep dive. Why Byzantium? The choice of site was a masterpiece of military and economic strategy. Located on a triangular peninsula, the city was surrounded by water on three sides: the Golden Horn to the north, the Bosporus to the east, and the Sea of Marmara to the south. This made it the ultimate choke point for trade. Every ship traveling from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean had to pass under its watch. Furthermore, it sat at the literal bridge between Europe and Asia, allowing the emperor to move troops rapidly to either the Persian frontier or the Danube River. It was a natural fortress that no other city in antiquity could match. As the 5th century dawned, the disparity between the two Romes became clear. In 410, the eternal city of Rome was sacked by Visigoths, a shockwave that rattled the foundations of the ancient world. Yet, as the West fell into darkness, Constantinople stayed safe. The secret to its survival was the massive Theodosian Walls. These were not just stone, they were the most sophisticated fortifications in the ancient world. A triple-layered system of moats, outer walls, and inner bastions that stood for a millennium. They were the physical manifestation of Roman endurance. The 5th century also saw the rise of the Huns. Attila, the scourge of God, reached the very gates of Constantinople. He looked upon the Theodosian Walls and realized that even his unstoppable horde could not breach them. He was forced to accept Byzantine gold instead of blood. This began a long tradition of Byzantine diplomacy, where the empire used its immense wealth to play its enemies against each other, using gold and titles to maintain the balance of power when steel was not enough. By 476, the Western Roman Empire had officially fallen. The last Western emperor was deposed, and the regalia of Rome was sent to Constantinople. The East, now led by Emperor Zeno, stood alone as the sole guardian of the Roman name. The citizens of Constantinople did not call themselves Byzantines. That is a term invented by later historians. They called themselves Romaioi, and they were determined to take their inheritance back. Historical deep dive. The Theodosian Walls. Constructed during the reign of Theodosius II, these were not a single wall, but a terrifying defensive system. First, an attacker faced a 20-meter wide moat. Beyond that was a low parapet, then an outer wall with towers. Finally, the massive inner wall stood 12 meters high and 5 meters thick, studded with 96 giant towers. This triple threat meant that even if an enemy breached the first wall, they were trapped in a killing zone between the two layers, pelted by arrows and Greek fire from above. For 1,000 years, they remained the most formidable obstacle in human history. The 6th century brought Justinian I to the throne. A man of tireless energy, he was a peasant-born ruler who sought to restore the empire to its former glory. But he did not rule alone. His right hand was Theodora, a former actress of legendary beauty and even greater intellect. Her courage would soon be tested by the fires of rebellion. In 532, the Nika riots broke out. For 5 days, the city burned as the blues and greens, the rival chariot racing factions of the Hippodrome, united against the emperor. As the flames licked the palace walls and Justinian prepared to flee by ship, Theodora famously stopped him. She told him, "Purple makes a fine burial shroud." Her words gave him the resolve to stay. The riot was crushed in a bloodbath in the Hippodrome, where 30,000 rebels were put to the sword. With his power secured, Justinian turned his focus to the heavens and the earth. He built the Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom. When he stepped inside its massive dome, which seemed to hang from heaven by a golden chain, he reportedly cried out, "Solomon, I have surpassed thee." To lead his armies, Justinian relied on Belisarius, a tactical genius. In a single year, Belisarius conquered the Vandal kingdom of North Africa. Next came Italy. The Gothic War was long and brutal, but Belisarius finally entered Rome, bringing the Eternal City back into the imperial fold. While Belisarius fought in the west, Justinian's lawyers were performing a task just as monumental, codifying 1,000 years of Roman law into the Corpus Juris Civilis. This legal tradition remains the foundation for the justice systems of nearly every modern nation today. But the peak of the empire was met with tragedy. In 541, the bubonic plague arrived, killing nearly half the population of Constantinople. Justinian himself caught the plague and survived, but the empire was never the same. Its strength was sapped, its coffers emptied, just as the Persians began to strike in the east. Historical deep dive, the Corpus Juris Civilis. While the Hagia Sophia was made of stone, Justinian's greatest monument was made of words. He commissioned a team of legal scholars, led by Tribonian, to organize the chaotic mass of Roman laws. They produced 4 works: the Codex, Imperial Laws, the Digest, Writings of Jurists, the Institutes, a textbook for students, and the Novellae, New Laws. This body of civil law eliminated contradictions and established principles like innocent until proven guilty and the right to a fair trial. It is the ancestor of the legal codes of most of modern Europe, Latin America, and parts of the United States. The late 6th century was a period of retreat. The Lombards took Italy, and the Slavs began to settle in the Balkans, permanently changing the European map. By 610, the empire was in total collapse. Enter Heraclius, the son of the Exarch of Africa. Heraclius inherited a disaster. The Sassanid Persians had taken Egypt and the Levant, even seizing the true cross from Jerusalem. Heraclius did the unthinkable. He took the army and marched deep into Persian territory, betting everything on a final, desperate counteroffensive. At the Battle of Nineveh in 627, he shattered Persian power forever. He returned the true cross to Jerusalem in a triumph the world had never seen. But the joy was brief. Both empires were exhausted, and from the deserts of Arabia, a new power was rising under the banner of Islam. The Battle of Yarmouk in 636 was the end of Roman Syria. The disciplined Byzantine legions were overwhelmed by the speed and fervor of the Arab cavalry. Heraclius lived to see his life's work vanish. Egypt, the breadbasket of the empire, fell next. Byzantium was forced to reinvent itself. It became more compact, more Greek, and more intensely Orthodox. To survive, the empire reorganized into themes, military districts where soldiers were given land in exchange for service. This created a class of peasant soldiers who had a personal stake in defending their homes. In 674, the Umayyad Caliphate launched a massive naval siege of Constantinople. The city was saved by the invention of Greek fire. This secret liquid could burn on water and could not be extinguished. It shattered the Arab fleet and became a symbol of the empire's technological edge. The 8th century brought a different kind of crisis. Iconoclasm. Emperor Leo III ordered the destruction of religious icons, sparking a religious civil war. For over 100 years, the breakers of images fought the venerators. This rift alienated the Pope in Rome, pushing the West further away and creating a cultural chasm that would never truly heal. The conflict finally ended in 843 under Empress Theodora II. The restoration of icons is still celebrated in the Orthodox Church as the triumph of orthodoxy. The 9th century saw the rise of the Macedonian dynasty, a period of military and cultural rebirth. At the heart of it all was the Great Palace of Constantinople. It was a city within a city, a sacred stage where every dress and gesture held symbolic meaning. The palace was designed to overawe foreign visitors with automated golden lions that roared and mechanical birds that sang in trees of gold. Trade was the lifeblood of this machine. Constantinople sat at the crossroads of the Silk Road and the sea routes connecting the north to the Mediterranean. The Byzantine gold coin, the nomisma, or solidus, remained unchanged in its weight and purity for over 700 years. It was the anchor of the medieval world economy, the dollar of the Middle Ages. To protect the emperor, the Byzantines recruited the Varangian Guard, an elite unit of Vikings and Anglo-Saxons known for their terrifying size and massive axes. These Northmen were fiercely loyal, bound by oath to the autocrator. The 10th century was also the age of the Porphyrogenetos, those born in the purple. This referred to children born to reigning emperors in a specific palace room lined with purple porphyry stone. Constantine XI, a true Porphyrogenetos, was a scholar who wrote De Administrando Imperio, a manual on how to manage the empire's neighbors through diplomacy and marriage. Historical deep dive. The Byzantine bureaucracy. The term Byzantine today is often used to mean overly complex or secretive. This stems from the empire's incredible administrative machine. At its peak, the empire was governed by a professional civil service that was centuries ahead of its time. To keep the palace running, the emperor employed a hierarchy of eunuchs, tax collectors, and diplomats. This bureaucracy ensured that even when an emperor was weak or a child, the state continued to function. It was this stability that allowed the Byzantine gold coin, the nomisma, to remain the stable currency of the world for 700 years. Byzantine influence spread through missionaries like Cyril and Methodius, who created the Cyrillic alphabet to bring the Slavic peoples into the Orthodox world. By the 10th century, the empire was a superpower again. Nikephoros Phocas, the pale death of the Saracens, retook Crete and Cyprus. His successor, John Tzimiskes, pushed into the Levant, reaching the gates of Jerusalem. Then came the most formidable of them all, Basil II. For nearly 50 years he ruled with iron discipline. He earned the name Bulgar Slayer after his total victory over the Bulgarian Empire. He left the treasury overflowing and the borders at their widest in centuries. Basil left the empire at its territorial and financial zenith in 1025. But Basil left no heir. After his death, a series of weak emperors and court intrigue began to erode the empire's strength. The old theme system was replaced by expensive mercenaries. In the east, a new threat appeared, the Seljuk Turks. In 1071, at the Battle of Manzikert, the Byzantine army was catastrophically defeated. The reliance on mercenaries failed as many hired troops fled. Emperor Romanus IV was taken prisoner, and the heartland of Anatolia lay open. This loss deprived the empire of its best soldiers and its main food supply. Desperate, the new emperor Alexios III de Komnenos turned to the west, pleading for help from Pope Urban II. The response was the First Crusade. When the Crusaders arrived in 1096, Alexios was horrified by their lack of discipline. The Latins saw the Byzantines as devious. The Byzantines saw the Latins as uncouth barbarians. Despite the tension, the First Crusade retook the coast of Anatolia. Alexios' daughter, Anna Komnene, became the world's first major female historian, recording these events in the Alexiad. Under the Komnenian dynasty, the empire enjoyed an Indian summer. Under Manuel Komnenos, Constantinople was the envy of the world, a place of tournaments, silk, and spices. But the Great Schism of 1054 had already split the church, and the distrust between East and West grew. To the Italians, the Byzantines were treacherous Greeks. This friction led to the rise of Andronikos I, a tyrant whose reign was marked by a massacre of the Latins in the city. The West would seek its revenge. In 1204, the Fourth Crusade was diverted by Venetian interests. Instead of attacking Egypt, the Crusaders attacked Constantinople. For the first time in 900 years, the city's walls were breached. The sack of Constantinople was one of the greatest crimes of history. Priceless art was destroyed, and the city was picked clean. The Crusaders even stole the 4 bronze horses from the Hippodrome, which still sit in Venice today. Historical deep dive, the Great Schism of 1054. Before the Crusades, the Christian world split in two. The Great Schism was the result of centuries of drifting between the Latin West and the Greek East. The final break happened when the Pope and the Patriarch excommunicated each other over theological issues, such as the Filioque clause in the Creed and the use of leavened versus unleavened bread. However, the real issue was authority. Rome claimed supremacy over all Christians, while Constantinople viewed the Pope as merely first among equals. This religious divorce meant that when the Turks arrived, the West often viewed the Byzantines as heretics rather than brothers. The empire was carved up into Latin states, but the Byzantine heart continued to beat in Nicaea. In 1261, Michael VIII Palaiologos managed to retake the city. But the restoration was a hollow victory. The world had changed. The Mongols had shattered the east and the Turks were reorganizing. The final dynasty, the Palaiologos, oversaw a Palaiologan renaissance. Even as the empire shrank to a tiny state, its art reached new heights. Vibrant frescoes and expressive icons from this era continue to influence religious art today. But art couldn't pay for armies. By the 1300s, the Ottoman Turks under Osman and Orhan had taken almost all of Anatolia. In a last desperate move, the empire tried a union of the Orthodox and Catholic churches to secure aid. The Byzantine people were furious. They famously said, "Better the Sultan's turban than the Pope's tiara." By 1451, the young Sultan Mehmed II took the throne. He built the Rumeli Hisar, the throat-cutter fortress, to cut off the city's supplies. The final siege began in April 1453. Mehmed brought 70 massive cannons, including the Basilica, a gun so large it could only fire 7 times a day. Inside, 7,000 defenders faced 80,000. In a feat of engineering, Mehmed moved his fleet overland on greased logs to bypass the iron chain, blocking the harbor. The final assault came on May 29th. Constantine XI, the last emperor of the Romans, saw that all was lost. He cast off his imperial regalia and charged into the thickest part of the fighting. He was never seen again. By noon, on May 29th, 1453, Constantinople had fallen. The Ottoman banner was raised, and the Hagia Sophia was converted into a mosque. The fall of Constantinople sent shockwaves through Europe, marking the end of the Middle Ages. But Byzantium did not truly die. Its scholars fled to Italy, bringing the Greek manuscripts that would ignite the Renaissance. They had been the librarians of the human race, preserving Plato, Aristotle, and Homer. In the East, the Orthodox Church carried the spirit forward. Byzantium was more than just a bridge. It was a fortress that held back the tides of invasion, allowing Europe the time to grow. They were the Romans of the Middle Ages, the keepers of the light. Their shadow still falls over our laws, our faith, and our art. The story of Byzantium is the story of us all. Thank you for watching this epic journey. If you enjoyed this deep dive, subscribe for more stories of the empires that built our world. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you want to explore more hidden chapters of history, be sure to subscribe. See you in the next video.